Look, I want to move on to another issue now. You know this coalition government and its constituent partners have made much, and we see in news today they've cracked down on some gang with some silly name. And it seems every week we are being shown pictures of firearms and drugs being seized by a resurgent police force who are cleaning up our streets and getting the bad guys behind bars. And part of the campaign to do this was the return to the 3 strikes policy, which gave very, very harsh sentences for repeat offenders, and it was called the 3 strikes policy. But and ACT, I think, campaigned on its reintroduction. It's part of the coalition agreement. But is it really back, or do we have an ersatz version of 3 strikes? Joining us now, and gosh, he wears a few hats, lawyer Stephen Franks, who's on the Sensible Sentencing Trust. Stephen, thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning. I want to get the context for this right. Can you tell us what the original 3 strikes policy was?
Yeah, how much time have we got, Sean?
Well, we got as much as we want. Let's go for it.
All right. When I was an MP, I was intrigued reading about California's experience. They brought in a 3 strikes policy, and they cut serious crime by 40% over a period of under 2 years. Huge.
Yeah.
And the State Department runs some pretty good trips, or did in those days, and I used one of their trips, and they set up interviews with people who'd been involved in bringing it in, including the Rand Corporation and who'd had to do the evaluation. And the people I spoke to said they had been opposed to it, thought it was stupid and just knee-jerk and all the rest of it, but had been stunned by the outcome, and no one could really account for it. It didn't fit their models. And to cut a long story short, the guys I spoke to said they still didn't like the idea of it, but it probably worked because criminals aren't as stupid as people think. They knew a new sheriff had arrived in town.
Yeah.
And the criminology is pretty clear. Offenders are gamblers. It's the most distinctive characteristic of offenders generally. They back themselves. They think they're winners, and they think that if there's a chance, they'll take it. So the best way to deter offending is speed and certainty of consequence. Severity is really not up there. You don't have to be really punitive, but the consequence should be speedy and certain. So we're looking at New Zealand's difficulties, and our justice system has become everything that doesn't work. It's over a year now for many offenders even to be tried, and then they can get a soggy judge. There's no predictability about sentencing.
And numerous legal avenues to delay the moment of truth.
And get off. And then, of course, once they're sentenced, they've got parole.
Yeah.
So every time a judge sentences in the New Zealand court, they're effectively lying.
Okay. In its first iteration, 3 strikes got rid of that right for repeat offenders.
Yes. The idea was simple. It's not that you're going to get a huge new sentence. It's just if you do repeat offending, you will get the maximum sentence for that offence, and you won't get parole. So it's within what criminals should expect anyway, that someday they'll get a maximum sentence.
Has and of course Labor got rid of it, right? Has reintroduced
sadly, before that,
the
judges got rid of it. The judges just decided they didn't like it.
Yeah.
And in the Fitzgerald case, the Supreme Court said that's okay. And there was an exception for manifestly unjust outcomes from the policy, and the judges just turned that into essentially the whole program is manifestly unjust, so we won't apply it.
God. So it's now been reintroduced by the coalition, or has it?
No. The first incredibly wet thing is they've left all the manifestly unjust stuff there. The first thing that should have happened is the Parliament telling the courts, you're not going to dick around with us like that, and you won't have that discretion. But they've left even the words there. I think it's and also now travesty. 3 strikes only applies if someone has been given for the very first one
a sentence of 12 months incarceration or greater?
Yes, yeah. So most of the first strikes are relatively trivial. People get more and more serious, and part of the theory of the criminology that sustains that is that people decide from experience on what the law actually is, not what it claims to be. So if you start your offending and get a nice soft sentence, you're getting a message that the man isn't really serious about...
So I just want to clarify, who has stuffed this up? Is it the courts or is it the new government in trying to reconstitute three strikes?
Well, they could have reinstated three strikes easily by just saying that the previous law applies and will take away manifestly unjust. But instead, it's a victory of the officials. I think ACT has clearly not insisted on getting what it bargained for in the coalition agreement, and I know that New Zealand First think that's just weird. Why would they give away?
Okay, so New Zealand First is upset about this. ACT is living with it. Who's the pair? Will it be David Seymour on this?
No, it's Nicole McKee.
Okay, and do you think she's stuffed up and doesn't understand it?
Well, there are very few lawyers in Parliament.
Yeah.
I think they just get... There's hardly anyone there who can stare down the officials.
Yeah.
And they've all been...
And where are the Nats on this? Just sitting on the fence like normal?
Well, the Minister of Justice apparently is the one who told the... it's all second, third hearsay, but I understand it's the Minister of Justice told Nicole McKee that they weren't going to reinstate, that they were going to do something which is much more acceptable to the lovies in Remuera.